I'm going to do is, well, do you all have any questions at this moment? All right, so on your module, you all were given a question about the environment and adaptation and which species of pig you would choose. I'm going to pull that up real fast. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share this with you all real fast so that you can read it again, and then I'm going to throw you in a couple breakout rooms, and I want you all to come to a consensus which pig you would choose or which breed you would choose and why. And while you all are discussing that, I'm going to take roll and maybe get my child to calm down. All right, so basically what I've done is I've given you a small farm, so 100 acres here in Kentucky. So most of you all should be relatively familiar with that. And in this farm, you want to add pigs to an already established operation. Hold on just one moment. I sent her to her room to cry. All right, so you have this small farm, you want to add pigs to the operation, and you want to raise them similarly to what is done at the Berea College Farm, which is in this animal welfare approved manner. You want them to have time spent out on pasture rather than being in an enclosed, intensive, specialized production facility. So I gave you two options. I gave you a Landrace large white cross and a Berkshire. And I gave you a little bit about these breeds. So take a moment, look at this, and then I am going to whip you guys into some quick breakout groups. Hi all, I'm glad you're back. I would like to hear your responses and what you guys spoke about. So will someone from group 1, which is Grayson's group, will you tell me which breed you chose and why?
Sure. So we chose the Berkshire one because it says it's a foraging animal. And if you've got 100 acres of land, that would probably be the best thing to do.
Did you guys Google anything about the different breeds?
Yeah. So the other breed is pretty much just bred for factory production.
Yeah. So group 2, which is Brock's group, what did you guys come up with? Anything different?
We also chose the Berkshire, and we looked into how, like, one, it is a foraging animal. It doesn't reproduce as fast, so 100 acres can sustain it, along with it's not as big as the white pig, and its body color is more suited to the outdoor environment and sunshine, so it doesn't get sunburnt as easily.
Perfect. Good answer. Group 3, are you along with them or opposite? This is Hallie's group.
So we kind of like were on edge. So we said, like, at first a few of us said that the Berkshire one would be a good one. But then we thought we didn't know if like 100 acres was enough for a foraging animal. So we thought because the other pig was so large and would produce so much meat that it would be better for sale production.
So honestly, those are not bad arguments. I personally would choose the Berkshire. That's because I'm familiar with the breeds, honestly. but again, it's your operation. So whatever you think would work. Now, when it comes to the size of the farm, that doesn't matter necessarily in terms of the species, but how many animals that it could be able to sustain or handle. And so if you have 100 acres and you want to rotate them through pasture, then you would just use fewer animals to be able to do that. All right, the fourth group, Alexis and Simon, did you guys have anything to add?
We also had Berkshire because we looked up that, or Trinity said that they were like easier to handle and more for like extensive farming.
Good. So how does adaptation in the environment, this is for all groups, and Jade kind of got at this concept, but how does adaptation to the environment affect which breed you should choose? And this is not just for swine, but for any animal that you decide to raise.
One could be because when you're adapted to a certain environment, you're more, I guess, resistant to certain diseases that are prevalent in there. So like outdoor environments usually have a lot more like potential diseases or illnesses. But since like the Berkshires are like used to that, they were more resistant to that kind of disease. Whereas like factory indoor ones probably wouldn't.
Yeah, that definitely, incidence of disease is definitely something that you would want to consider when choosing the breeds. What else, guys? Well, Jade said the skin color. You may not necessarily think about that, but if you have a really light skinned animal, it can get very sunburned if you had a, that is my child, I'm sorry. All right. Next, in terms of adaptation in the environment, there was one comment I wanted to make after I graded Gerald's quizzes. And a lot of people said that when we are doing when natural selection occurs, that it's the environment selecting these traits. And this wording appeared throughout. But I want to point out that it's not the environment selecting traits. The environment cannot like select traits. What's happening is that the environment puts pressure on the animals to adapt and survive. And in this process, we inevitably have traits that become prominent and others that become lost. And you all basically got basically everyone got that natural selection is much slower than artificial selection. And so in the livestock and domesticated species, humans have put a lot of pressure to select for the certain traits. Your video was on domestic species like dogs, but this has occurred in all domestic species that we talk about, including the cattle. All right. There's one more thing I wanted to do. Well, two more things I want to do before I start my boring lecture. It's not boring, it's fun. First, I want to make a list as a class of different defining characteristics of an intensive system versus an extensive production system. So, extensive production, what is a characteristic? Anyone? All right, LeVar, what's a characteristic of an extensive production system?
Doesn't it have higher labor?
Yes. Why is the labor higher?
Is it because it's not as, I guess, machine oriented or more industrialized and intensive?
Yes, it's less mechanized. Perfect. Let's see. Michaela, what else?
Isn't it low capital investment?
Yes, less machinery, less building, less capital investment, which would be the money you put up front to be able to build facilities.
I got a bake. Wait, not a big bake, a dance bake, because then I can get food, get a drink, go party, or just dance along.
Okay, if you guys are interested, it's time for a dance break in this kindergarten class. All right, Cyan, what else from an extensive?
Wait, can you repeat what was just said? I don't want to repeat something.
Oh, no, we talked about the mechanization. We talked about capital investment. We talked about labor. So
Okay, so the low animal density.
yes, low animal density. Perfect. There's one more that I'm looking for this. Simon, do you know what it is?
7, 8, 9, 10.
The larger area of land.
Yes, which yes, which also factors into the animal density that we were just talking about. Am I feeding my animals in an extensive system? Am I feeding them a bunch of corn that's been tracked from the middle states of the U.S. from the Corn Belt, or any of the above?
Aren't they like a more of a pasture raised production system?
Yes, so pasture raised production systems is one of the key defining characteristic of an intensive system versus more of an intensive system. Now, true or false for anybody? Are all systems true 100% intensive or 100% extensive?
Not usually.
No, it's kind of a scale or a continuum. So it's and most production systems are either semi-intensive or semi-extensive, meaning they have characteristics of both. Now, Berea College Farm is very much on the extremes of the extensive side, and it's a lot more extensive than you're going to find in most places throughout the U.S. All right, that is our fun review. So I'm going to start with lecture unless anyone has any other questions. All right, lecture is going to be relatively short. Previously, I've done this lecture in one class, but it becomes a lot of information being thrown at you because I'm covering anatomy, and specifically, I'm going to be covering details of internal anatomy. Therefore, this time I'm actually breaking it up into two. So today I'll probably only talk for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll stop and pick up tomorrow. You all do have a handout associated with this, and it would have been given to you in your box already printed out. Now, as we go through the lecture, the things that you are looking for are highlighted in red in this presentation. So I hope you will be able to figure out what answers and pick out what you need from the presentation. All right, I'm going to give you all just a moment because some people are moving.
Just to make sure I have the right thing, it's the internal anatomy packet, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not good at whistling, guys. All right, let's get started. We're talking about basic anatomy today, but I'm mostly going to focus on internal anatomy because external, you're going to get a lot of that information in your module. You have to do a handout. And please remember that this module is one of the 2 longest modules of your class. So please don't wait till Friday to start it or you're not going to get done. Right. Basic anatomy. Anatomy is what we're concerned with in terms of looking at form, disposition, and the structure of the tissues and organs. From Greek, this means cutting apart, so it's looking at all the separate pieces. We consider anatomy to be the mother of all disciplines, and from that, we have various subspecialties, more or less, that arise. So we have physiology, histology, embryology, phylogeny, etc. We study the live animal in various ways. Observation, so this would simply be going out to the field, watching the animals, seeing how they're behaving, looking for any signs of distress, issues, etc. Palpation, this is basically a manual way that we can feel tissues, and we're looking for things such as lumps. And we're basically just kind of pressing around to see. Percussion is where you hit something. Auscultation, endoscopy, and laparoscopy. The difference between those two is one, endoscopy, you go through a hole that already exists, such as the rectum, to scope something, whereas laparoscopy, you create your own incision and stick a scope, or you go through a created hole. Then we have all of the imaging, radiography, ultrasound, Doppler, etc. A lot of these are also used in humans as well. So if you've never done them on an animal, it's possible some of these have been done to you through various medical procedures. We kind of break this up into 3 different levels of anatomy. We have the macroscopic, which is what we can see with an eye, basically just looking. You don't need anything. We examine this using a scalpel. Then we have the microscopic, which this is finer details. So a lot of times we need a microscope at least to see this type of anatomy. We have developmental, which is what we look for over time as an animal develops. Most of the time we're looking at this. Well, this starts from conception while the animal's in utero, and we can study it all the way through senescence, which is basically the last stage before death. And then we look at them systematically and regionally. So it's just different ways we kind of break down the way that we're studying animals. Like I said, external anatomy, this is our surface anatomy, and it's basically just looking at the different parts of the animal and giving them a name. We have a tail head, pin, the rounder thigh, stifle, hooks, dew claw. Dew claw is the same with dogs and cats as well. I'm not going to read all of these to you because you all are in college, but I want you to know that we do have names for all the different body parts of animals externally, and most of them are going to translate from animal to animal, though there are a few of them that are species specific. So then we'll start internal anatomy. Internal anatomy, we basically study by dissection, hence why you all get to do dissections during this week's lab. We study groups of organs or tissues, and or we can break it down and study things that have common functions. Now, these are the systems we are going to discuss in this class. Again, in red means it's something you have a space on your paper to fill out. So we're going to look at the musculoskeletal system, the digestive system, respiratory, cardiovascular, nervous, reproductive, endocrine, urogenital, and then we have the special senses. Also note that if you miss something during this presentation, the slides are posted.
Someone don't know. It says letters that we're saying. That is 1, 2, 3. That are not letters and numbers. I'm gonna say numbers and I say numbers first.
So the first system we're going to look at is the musculoskeletal system, and this consists of both the muscles and the bones, as you could imagine. The function of the skeleton, there are two major functions. One is it has biomechanical function, and this is where it supports the body, and then it provides levers. So it's basic physics, so it uses levers in terms of locomotion. And then we also have skeletons that protect soft parts, i.e. the skull and the brain, the rib cage, and all of your internal organs, etc. The secondary role of the skeleton is what we refer to as homeostasis. And this is a tendency towards a relatively stable equilibrium. If you want to think of it, it's basically a steady state. In the body, everything is always moving. Things are always flowing, transferring from one place to another, and balancing out. Now, when this is in a happy, steady state, we call this homeostasis. It's not homeostasis if something gets off balance, and a lot of times that's going to move you towards disease. Now, the reason we call homeostasis as a secondary function of the skeleton is because the bones are a reserve of calcium, phosphate, and other ions that are necessary for life. We have different classifications of bones. We have the cranial skeleton, which would be at the skull, and then the postcranial skeleton, which is the axial and appendicular. So basically all other bones except for the skull. We have individual bones. We have long bones, which is what we see for a lot of our limbs and levers. Short bones are what's involved in joints and movement. The more short bones involved in a joint, the more movement that joint's going to be able to have. And then we have flat bones, and flat bones such as the scapula, which is your shoulder blade, are solely there for the purpose of muscle attachment. Now, these are different skulls of domestic species. I'm gonna have you guys guess because that's fun. Does anyone know what any of these skulls are off the top of your head?
One kind of looks like a horse skull.
And which one is that?
The right, bottom right.
Yes, that one is. So this one is the horse skull. Oh, that is not. Horse skull. It has a large mandibular or mandible bone and mandibular process for muscle attachment. You can see this is huge. Horses have very, very strong jaws. And so muscle would be attaching all through this part of their skull. All right, what else? Anyone know what this one would be?
I think that's a pig, isn't it?
Not this one.
No.
Nope, there's a pig on here though. Take another guess. Which one's the pig?
If I had to guess, I would say probably the one in the top right.
No. With the goofiest one on here. Which one's the goofiest one on here?
I don't know. They all look kind of funny to me.
This one. This is a pig. Yeah, it's kind of a special bone skull. But if you look at this and then Google the head of a pig, it makes sense. But seeing a skull flat out, it does not look pleasant. All right, next then, what would be this one with the this one with the horns?
Is it a cow?
That is a cow. Good job. All right, down here on the left, most of you all have this as a pet.
A dog.
It's a dog. You see it has giant canines, sharp incisors, and even sharp molars and premolars, all for tearing flesh. So this one up here, it's another domestic species, house animal, large canines, sharp molars and premolars and incisors. What would that be?
Was it a cat?
It is. That is a domestic house cat. Perfect. So basically, I was just showing you the different ways that skulls can come. We identify them by a lot of times by their teeth. Another thing I do want to point out here, I believe it comes up again in a minute, is you see there are no canines on the cow as well as the horse. Well, horse is a little special. They have the wolf teeth, but basically what we have is we have incisors that they bring the food in with, and then the molars and premolars that they're going to grind their foods with. And this is indicative of the diet that they consume, whereas they're not going to consume any meats. They're strictly herbivores. So the cow, and you can tell this by the dentition, the horse also has molars and premolars for grinding up feed stuff. Whereas, like I pointed out, the dog and the cat, very sharp teeth, they are carnivores. They rip flesh, tear it, and then have to chew it. And then a pig is an omnivore. So it has kind of components of each, though the pig is kind of an odd example because it looks like somebody just stuck a bunch of little pieces of teeth in there and hope for the best. Muscles. Now we do have different muscles as part of the musculoskeletal system. First, we have cardiac muscle, and this is a special type of smooth muscle that lines the heart as well as the veins and arteries, all things associated with the cardiovascular system. It is involuntary, which means we cannot cognitively control the movements that are occurring, or animals cannot, but this is the same for us as well. Skeletal muscle, this is the muscle we think of with voluntary movement. If you want to go out and flex your muscle, you're going to be flexing your skeletal muscle. We can cognitively control these processes, and they attach to bones. And when it does the attachments, the sole purpose is to affect or cause movements by either pulling or relaxing. About 50% of an animal's weight is attributed to being skeletal muscle. We then have smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is another form of muscle that is involved in involuntary movements. And these we see lining the reproductive tract, the gastrointestinal tract. And what they do is they help to move feed stuff, digest it in the tracts, as well as will help aid in sperm getting from place to place, or and an ova after ovulation to get through the reproductive tract. This is just a picture showing you all some of the actions that skeletal muscles can have. They will attach to various places on the body, and when they contract and pull, it's basically a lever and pulley system, like you think of from a basic physics course. Again, same with the leg, knees, all other joints. All right, next we have the digestive system. So I'm going to go through the digestive system and then we'll stop for today. From the digestive system, make sure you are able to trace food as it goes in the mouth out the rectum or anus. In a dog, which I have as an example here, I believe you do actually have to color the same picture, if not the same, a very similar one in your handout or your packet. So we start with the mouth and the lips, goes through pharynx into the esophagus, and then it's going to go into the stomach. The stomach here is actually number 5. This number 6 is sitting, this is the liver. We have the stomach, then it goes into the small intestines. Small intestines has 3 different portions. I'm not listing them out right now. And then it will go into the large intestines. The large intestines here, there's an ascending, a transverse, and a descending large intestine. And it'll go out through the colon through the rectum to the anus. This right here, number 11, is pointing to what we call a cecum. It's not written on here, but we'll talk more about a cecum in just a moment. All right, when we talk about digestive systems, as I mentioned last class, we have two different categories we're going to refer to quite often in this course. We have monogastrics and we have ruminants. Monogastric has this one true stomach. That would be humans, also mice, rats, horses, pigs. These are all monogastric species. In here, the stomach capacity tends to be relatively small, and then this food in the stomach is broken down by enzymatic digestion, and then the majority of the nutrients will be absorbed in the small intestine. If we want to look at this here, I believe this is a dog, but I'm not 100% sure. What we see at the top is the liver. And so this big red one's a liver, and sitting just below it is the stomach, this number 2. We have basically the small intestines are wrapped around the inside, and when we see the large intestines, they'll come out and around and down, but they're kind of tucked back behind these intestines at the moment. Next, we have ruminants. So ruminants have a 4-part foregut. You may have heard that they have 4 stomachs. That is not the case. Basically, it's one large giant stomach with 4 different compartments. It is very, very large. Now, these 4 compartments are the reticulum at the front, the rumen, which is the majority of it, and then we have the omasum and the abomasum. Now, the abomasum is what is most similar to a monogastric stomach, or what we refer to as the true stomach. Here, many nutrients are actually absorbed through the wall of the rumen, and then what makes it out of the rumen gets absorbed within the small intestines. Again, the rumen capacity is very, very large. And because of this, and they have this rumen, which contains what we call microbes or microbial population, that is set up to efficiently break down high structural carbohydrates. So this is what we see with forages, a lot of hays, other roughages. They have these highly structural carbohydrates that are very difficult to break down. We as humans do not have such an efficient ability to break down carbohydrates or these structural carbohydrates. We can, but it would basically be like if we were to go out and pick a stalk of plant and just chew on the stem all day, we're not going to be able to efficiently get very many nutrients out of that. The ruminants that we are concerned with are cows, sheep, and goats. This is just a diagram of how the ruminant sits, the rumen and the foregut of an animal sits within the digestive tract, or within the body, excuse me. The left side of the animal, so up here we have the head, here's the tail. The left side of the animal is almost entirely made up of the rumen. And these are just different sacs within the rumen. And when feed stuff goes in there, it kind of hangs out, gets mixed with the microbial population, where they're able to attach to and basically break down the structural carbohydrates and convert that into what we call volatile fatty acids, or VFAs. These VFAs are then absorbed up into the animal through the rumen. Now, what's pretty cool is if you were to do what we call a cannula or fistula on a cow, you can come in behind the rib cage, which would be about here, and then we'll come in and make a hole. And that hole will lead directly into the rumen. And so people can go in and actually take out samples of feedstuff, digester, or even the microbial population and study that in a research setting so that we create diets or where we can better feed animals. When we look at the right side of the animal, then all other compartments that we talk about sit over here. So this is the head, comes down into the esophagus. This yellow portion. This is the reticulum. This 18 is the omasum, and this 15 is the abomasum. When we feed an animal, the feed will come down through its esophagus. It'll first go into the reticulum, and then the ruminant will actually regurgitate its food and chew it, and this is what we call rumination. All of this I'm telling you right now, just to kind of introduce you to the concepts. You will be getting more information on this in at later times. All right. What time is it? I think for the sake of time, that's going to be it for the day. We'll start with our intestines tomorrow, simply because I know some of you all have class conflicts just directly after this. So let me unshare my screen. All right. Hi, everyone. Did you make it through me throwing a bunch of information at you? Perfect. Any questions before I go for the day?
I have a question about the packet.
Yes.
So is it okay if we fill it out on a Word document each on Moodle, or do we like have to? We're not sending this back in to you, are we?
Nope, I don't care how you fill it out. It's solely for you to know what I'm going to ask you questions about.
Okay.
Or what I expect you to know. Sorry, dogs are being bad. Other questions? All right. Julie and Lars, everyone else, you're free to go.